Hey guys, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey, Emily.
Hello.
So I'm in the car. I'm in the car right now. I'm running late from a meeting, so that's why I don't have my video going.
Okay.
But you guys are welcome to ask me questions, and I'm happy to answer them. Hello, welcome. Hi, Rebecca.
Hi.
So I was just telling Emily, I'm in the car coming back home from a meeting that ran late. So that's why I don't have any video on right now. But you guys are welcome to ask me questions, and I'm happy to answer them.
Okay.
Did anybody have anything in particular they were curious about, or did everybody just want to hang out and listen to other people's questions?
I didn't have anything in particular. I think I was just a little unsure of the exercises that we had to do with the synthesis chart and everything. So I was hoping just to kind of like hear what other people thought and to kind of maybe pick up questions from that way.
Okay. So was there anything in particular that that was throwing you off about the exercises?
I remember that you said if your synthesis chart was complete enough that it would be easy then to put together the roadmap paragraph. And I think mine wasn't complete enough because I kind of struggled with filling in bits and pieces when I look at the model and then what I had in my chart. So how do you know it's complete enough?
Wait a minute. I'm having a little bit of trouble hearing you. If you'd speak up just a little bit.
I was looking at the model answer for the armed robbery and filling that in with the amount of details versus what was in my synthesis chart. I don't know if I was doing it as thoroughly. So I guess that was my, I guess that's just how I felt, was that it wasn't very clear in my synthesis chart to do the roadmap.
I'll tell you what, let me try this because I'm still having trouble hearing you, Rebecca. Emily, could you hear what she was saying?
Yes.
Okay, could you repeat it? Because Emily, your volume seems to be a little bit louder.
She said that she was having difficulty with creating the synthesis chart.
Right.
Because according to one of your videos or our discussion in class, if our synthesis chart is complete enough, that doing the roadmap paragraph, it would be easier if it's complete enough. And James' iPad said, I'm sorry, I'm really bad at names.
So I have my husband's iPad. and I don't know how to change it.
But yeah, she was saying that she was having difficulty doing the synthesis map, that she didn't understand whether it was complete enough because she was having difficulty doing the roadmap paragraph.
Okay, so I think I'm still having a little bit of trouble hearing, and I'll be home in like 5 minutes, which will help. But I think what I'm hearing is you're having trouble figuring out the relationship between the synthesis chart and the roadmap paragraph.
Yeah.
Okay, so the synthesis chart, the one where you synthesize the rule, and then the case chart, the one where you lay out the, where you have the grid with the factors and the cases, those are for the sole purpose of synthesizing a rule that will fill some kind of gap, okay? So let's put that part aside. The function of the roadmap paragraph is to give the reader basically an overview of the area of law that you're in, and to sort of start with the general rule and keep getting more specific until you get to the rule that is needed to resolve the issue, okay? So where the synthesized rule fits into that generally is sort of at the end of the roadmap paragraph, because usually what happens is you keep looking at the rule more specifically and more specifically until you get to a part where there's a gap, or there's some question either about what the rule is and or how the rule applies to a particular set of facts. So what happens as you draft that roadmap paragraph is you get more specific, and then you're going to reach a place where sometimes, not always, but you'll reach a place sometimes where there's a gap in the law that has to be filled with that synthesized rule. And so that's when you plug that synthesized rule into the roadmap paragraph. So if you think of it in terms of the process is that you start with all of those Module 1 skills. You identify the rules, whether it's an express rule in a case, an express rule in a statute, or a synthesized rule. So you identify the rules or you synthesize them. Then you break them down into their elements, and you'll have the causal term in the result, but really what you really need are the elements. So you break them down into elements, and then you sort of look at which cases help you with each element. And once you've done that, you're done with those Module 1 skills, and you're ready to move on to the Module 2 skills, which is communicating your analysis. So the assignment that you have is the last skill from Module 1, which is synthesizing a rule, and the first skill from Module 2, which is writing the roadmap paragraph. So once you synthesize the rule, then you've got all the pieces you need to begin writing the roadmap paragraph. Does that help?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's
okay.
a little clearer.
So listen, so I'm going to do this. I'm going to put you guys, if you guys will sit tight for me for 5 minutes, I'm going to kill my audio, but you guys go ahead and stay put, and I'll be, or, go get a drink of water or whatever. And I will be there in about 5 minutes, and then I'll be able to hear everything.
Okay.
Okay, everybody, I can hear you now. Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So, okay. So, what other questions do y'all have?
Hold on. Okay. So can I just get some clarification, I guess, on the two, because I submitted 2 charts for the cases. I just wanted to make sure that I guess I'm
Right.
going in the right direction. I know the first chart that I had included the facts and the factors and then the result, and if there was a dissenting, it's like when we did the first time in class. And then my second chart only, I guess, divulged
Right.
the factor, like intent to cause injury and dangerous weapon. So I just want to make sure like I'm on the right direction, because I split the charts into I guess 4 or 5 to make sure that I kind of broke it down and made it easier for me to understand. But I feel like when I do it, I come to class and they're like, oh, this is how it's supposed to be done. I'm like, oh boy, I've got it all backwards.
Okay. So the first chart is the synthesis chart, and that's one where you summarize the rules. I mean, you summarize the cases for the purpose of deriving factors or the elements.
Okay.
Okay, because you're trying to synthesize a rule. There's not one out there that specifically. There's not a rule out there that articulates exactly what the court has been doing. So you're going to have to derive that rule. In the first chart, you summarize the cases so that you can begin to see what factors or elements the court is considering involving this issue. Okay.
Okay.
The purpose of the second chart factors or elements that you derived from the first chart, and then the case names are down the side,
Mm-hmm.
and then you fill it in with the facts that relate to each factor. So the purpose of the first chart is to derive the top row of the second chart.
Okay.
And then the purpose of the second chart is to guide you in drafting the analysis, which starts you on the module 2 skills.
Okay.
So the second chart is the one that you're going to use to help you draft your rule explanation and application,
Okay.
which we haven't talked about yet.
All right, because I know I use it to kind of help with my synthesis rule, but I feel like I feel like the rule that I came up with is still a little general. I mean, I did use it in regards to the way I worded it. I used my chart, but I feel like maybe it's not specific enough, because I know in the roadmap, we're supposed to go from like the penal laws, which are really general, into something more specific, which it comes up our synthesis rule. But I feel like mine is still a little general, if that makes sense.
Yeah, hold on just one second. Let me shut my phone off, or we're about to go into feedback. Okay, so let me
Sorry, I have my chart like open on the side so that way I can take a look at it.
Yeah.
Apparently I'm not. Good. Okay. Okay. So let me show you. I'm going to pull up a couple of things to sort of show you by example.
Okay.
Oops, hold just 1 second. Yeah, that'll work. Okay. So this is the armed robbery example. And so this is the first chart where you're identifying the elements or the factors that you need for a synthesized rule.
Okay.
With this one, you've got 3 elements of the offense, and then only one of those elements is at issue, which is just like your case. And then within this one, you've got a term, use of an offensive weapon, but there's no definition of offensive weapon, okay? And similarly, one of the terms in your definition of dangerous weapon, one of those terms is not clearly defined. So you need to figure out what the definition is through how the courts have handled it. So here, we're going to try to figure out what an offensive weapon is by looking at the cases. So in the first column, we identify what it is that we need a definition for. In the other columns, we summarize the cases so that we can get a sense of what it is the court's looking for, okay? So by looking at these cases, what we figure out is, underneath it in this bottom row, that the courts are considering in all of these cases the capacity to produce harm and the method of use of the object, okay? So once we've identified those as the 2 important elements, now we're going to take those, now we're ready to draft a case chart that will catalog all of the information we need for the analysis, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now we've got a case chart here. So our cases are down the left side, and now the things that we had that we derived from that first chart are across the top. So we're going to have the object used, because that's the basic factual information. In the plagiarism and the bar examiners, the basic factual information was what was the academic misconduct. Here, the basic factual information is what was the object used. Next, so that's the first thing, is the basic facts. That last column is always going to be the result. And then the columns between those 2 are going to be whatever factors or elements you derive from the first chart. So in the first chart, we derived these two elements, whether it was capable of harm as it was used, and what was the method of its use, okay? So when we put all of the information from the precedent cases in the first 3 rows, and then our last row, we have our client's case, now we can start to see
where it is that the problem is going to be for our client. The problem with our client is whether or not this thing is capable of harm as used. And if it is capable of harm as used, then that's going to tell us whether it's an offensive weapon or not. Okay? So our synthesized rule, which we could derive from the first chart, but we refine it after the second chart, is that an offensive weapon is an object, so that's the first column, that is capable of producing harm when used as the defendant used it. Okay? So now we've got the three things that get us to our result is the identity of the object, its capacity for harm, and use as the defendant used it. And this chart helps us apply the rule to our facts on that last row. So when we start thinking about coming to a decision about what is likely to happen with this case, we see that because this object was pointed and either, waved or swung, depending on how you describe it, if these actions are more like swinging, then the case is more like beta, right? Because in beta, he struck the victim with a motion that occurred in an arc, and swinging occurs in an arc. So this case is more like beta. However, if we say it's more like a pointing motion, then it's more like alpha and gamma. Okay? So those are all things that you need to know kind of as you're going into the communication skills, which are the next module. So you've got sort of an idea of the way that your arguments are going to be set up. That the prosecution is going to say, well, swinging is like striking. And so swinging is the same motion as striking. It's just one is horizontal and one is vertical. Therefore, the court should find that this is like beta and that this was an offensive weapon. The defense is going to say, no, swinging is just like pointing, but in motion. It has the same reach as pointing. It's just that you're moving it back and forth. And so you can't get any closer to him by swinging it because the owner was in front of him. So this is just like pointing, and that makes it like alpha and gamma. So that's the argument the defendant will make. And then you come to a conclusion as to which you think is the more likely of those two arguments. So that's the purpose of this second chart here, is that you take the factors or elements from the first chart, you plug them in there, you refine your synthesized rule, and then start to figure out which of these cases is your case more like. Because since we have a system of precedent, you can't just argue how the language of the rule applies to your case. You've got to be arguing how the case is like another case, because similar cases have to be compared similarly, or have to be resolved similarly. So that's why you're going to point out why this is like another case. Okay. So the first chart, the purpose is to derive the factors or elements that go in the second chart. The second chart is basically a summary of all the cases in your facts, organized by the factors or elements that have to be used. And so this is a catalog of all the information you need for your analysis, which is what you do in Module 2. Does that help?
Yeah, I understand that. I guess I was concerned if I was pulling out the right factors out of the cases from before. It went well with all the other cases when I used intent to cause harm and like offensive weapon, and I broke them down if there was intent. Hold on, let me see if I can minimize this for a second. What did I do? I use intent if it caused an injury, and then I did what kind of instrument it was, and was it capable of causing death the way it was used. So it made sense when I created the chart for each case and did break it down on how it was, how the case resulted, because then I did have the result, but then I felt like I had enough information, but I guess the way I put it together may not have sounded the same, because when I did my roadmap, I was just like, okay, well, I feel like it's the same information going over it, like the same thing being said different ways.
Okay. So I've got the two statutes up on the screen.
Mm-hmm.
Only one of these terms is at issue. Just like every other problem we've done so far, I'm only giving you one issue to resolve. And so plagiarism was just one issue, and the issue was simply which of those factors do we use. Armed robbery was one issue, and that issue is what is the definition of offensive weapon, and do these weapons does this weapon qualify? Likewise, as you read the cases and as you read the facts, one of the first things you need to do is figure out which of these terms is at issue, because there's only one. There's only one term in this whole thing that's at issue.
And that would be what, the dangerous instrument?
Well, so within the first statute, the assault statute, so it's by means of a deadly weapon or a dangerous instrument. We know this isn't a deadly weapon. So here the question is whether it's a dangerous instrument, right?
Yes.
Now here we have a definition for dangerous instrument. It means any instrument, article, or substance, including a vehicle, under the circumstances in which it is used, attempt to be used, or threatened to be used, is readily capable of causing death or other serious physical injury. Now, only one of these terms is at issue. Okay? And so the first question is, let me start with the last element because that's easier. Was the hot water readily capable of causing death or other serious physical injury?
If according to the elements, I would say yes. If according to the penal law's elements, if it was a substance under the circumstances.
No, I'm just asking you about the last one. You can't answer one element with the answers to other elements.
Okay.
So dangerous instrument has three characteristics, and that's these three elements. You can't say it has element one if it has element three, right? Because element 1 and 3 are independent elements. So how do we know it was readily capable of causing death or other serious physical injury?
Because the person just got severe burns.
Yeah, because it did in fact, we know it's capable of it because it did in fact do it. He was in fact seriously physically injured, okay?
Right.
So we know we've got that one. Is the water an instrument, article, or substance?
I would say substance, I guess.
Okay.
In like the physical sense.
Okay, so water is a substance. So then the only question is, under the circumstances in which it is used, attempted to be used, or threatened to be used, right?
Mm-hmm.
What do the cases suggest about where the issue is?
In the way in which it was used.
Okay, and what's the issue there?
If it could be considered, I guess, a dangerous weapon, or the way the defendant was using it itself.
It can't be if it could be considered a dangerous weapon, because under New York law, a dangerous weapon isn't a thing. It's either a deadly weapon or a dangerous instrument.
Okay.
I'm going to give you a word that you can use for this, because it can get really frustrating because you've got to use words differently for different things. And so a deadly weapon is different than a dangerous instrument legally. Those are two different things. They have different definitions. What you're referring to is an object. So if it's an object or instrument, article, or substance, and we know it's a substance, the question is use, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that means we need a definition for use to know whether this water was used for this purpose. Right?
Yeah.
Now, you've got two cases involving sidewalks, right?
Yes.
In one, the court said the sidewalk wasn't used. The sidewalk is an instrument. It is readily capable of causing death or serious physical injury, but it wasn't used here. In the other case, the court said, yes, the sidewalk was used. So you start to get a sense of what use means, but there's no definition of use. So you're going to have to synthesize a rule for that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I did not do that.
Okay.
Neither did I. Don't feel bad. I was so frustrated.
It looks easy when somebody else does it. And the first step to being able to do something is to be able to follow somebody doing it. You can't do it yourself unless you can follow somebody doing it. And so you don't want to minimize the accomplishment of being able to follow how it's done. But there's a big difference between following how it's done and then doing it yourself. Those are very different. And so, you know, the first step was spending some time watching me do it and kind of helping out with that in class last week. And then the next step is you take a stab at it yourself. I don't anticipate that many of you are going to get it right on the money. In fact, I'm going to be surprised. Some people might get kind of close, but it's really rare that students nail this because there's no way to nail it. It's like saying, I'm going to teach you how to ride a bike and I'm going to do it in a way that you never fall off when you're learning yourself. Well, that's just not going to happen. You're going to fall. You have to fall off to find your balance, to figure it out. And so this first attempt is absolutely frustrating. And you're not going to have as much success as you're used to having with things academically. But it's a necessary step. Falling off the bike is a necessary prerequisite to finding your balance the next time. And so I don't expect these to be on the money. And that's why tomorrow I will post a synthesis chart that you should use going forward.
Okay.
And so the more experience you get with this, the easier it becomes.
I hope so.
It does. This is just really, really tough. This is the hardest part of the course, which is why I put it at the very beginning, because that way you get to practice this one over and over again all semester long. Whereas the other ones you don't need as much practice with, and so they can wait until a little bit longer.
Okay.
Yeah, so the skills get progressively easier as you go through the semester. And this is definitely the hardest one. The next one is sort of the next hardest one. And then the research is by far the easiest skill you'll learn. And it's one of the reasons it's easier is because you will have done these two skills first.
All right. Now I understand it. Like while you're explaining it, I understand that it ends up pointing out what the rule needs to be or what you're looking for.
Right.
But when I'm doing it, I guess I'm not like, I have the elements and I'm looking at them and I'm like, okay, well, these all are satisfied. So how am I going to create a rule? So I guess that's how I'm getting myself mixed up.
Yeah.
But now it's like when I do something else, like if I get elements, how am I going to identify which is going to be the issue, what we need to create a rule for?
And that's a big skill that you're learning a lot. Like I don't really, like issue spotting isn't really an issue that we cover in legal process because that is an issue that you cover in contracts and torts a lot. So in legal process, I usually give you the issue or I let you flounder with it a little bit and then give it to you. But almost always I tell you guys, here's what the issue is. Here's what the problem is. But in contracts and torts, you're going to learn a lot of issue spotting. Like they'll give you a rule and then say, you know, how are you going to resolve? What are you going to have to know to resolve it? And in that way, you're going to learn issue spotting. And that's what some of the written assignments that you do in contracts in particular, the purpose of those is spotting the issue. the multiple choice questions that you do in contracts and torts, the purpose of that, again, is helping you spot the issue.
Okay.
So it gets easier, I promise.
Okay. So you will be, I guess, posting a one for the roadmap as well, or no?
I won't post one for the roadmap because you guys are going to get a grade on that.
Sorry. Okay. All right.
Any other questions? Anybody? Any ICW stuff you want me to go over?
No, I spoke to your TA, Shannon, about after the last ICW. So she kind of went over some stuff with me.
Great.
So, and I did a little bit better on this ICW. So
Good.
they still take me a lot of time, and sometimes they can get frustrating because I think I have the rule and then it's something different. So I just have to remember to keep going back and forth. I feel like the blue book confuses me a little bit versus your book, but I have to remember to just, I guess, put it all together as best as I can. And then usually the hints help, but sometimes I'm like, the hint is not what's highlighted. So how am I supposed to know what to do or how to change it?
Right.
So, but yeah, I had reached out and we had talked and she had gone over some stuff with me. So
Good. Good. All right.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome, Chanel. I'll see you next week.
All right. Bye.
Emily, do you and Rebecca have any more questions?
Wait, so we're gonna be graded on the current roadmap paragraph that we submitted, or are we gonna be resubmitting the roadmap paragraph and then that's gonna be graded?
You're going to resubmit the entire document, not the charts, but you're going to resubmit the entire analysis on October 3rd.
Okay.
And that's what you get graded on. This is
I see.
just for you to get feedback.
Okay.
Yeah, and you can check on Canvas. Every single assignment tells you whether there are points associated with it or not. So for example, at the top of this one, it says this assignment does not count toward the grade.
Right. I did see that. I just got confused when you said it was going to count. And I'm like, no, it's not.
Well, I mean, I'm not going to post an example.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah, so this assignment does not count toward the final grade.
I'm still having difficulty in the roadmap paragraph where we eliminate elements, and when we like, what do you call those? So when we highlight the essential elements and when we eliminate the ones that we're not going to cover, I don't know if I'm doing that correctly or not.
Okay.
I obviously forgot to, or just didn't see that we had to eliminate 2 elements of the New York Penal Law 1013. I actually just eliminated 1 that we were focusing on 2 of them.
Okay.
But do we, I don't know. I guess I don't know how to articulate. Is there any way that you could pull up my roadmap paragraph and just kind of go over it with me by any chance?
I'm going to give everybody feedback on it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and this, the one that I have on the screen, this last sentence, this does the same thing as the sort of the dispositional statement, because sometimes you can say what you're not going to talk about, or you can point out what you are going to talk about. So this memo will address only whether or not Burr used an offensive weapon.
Okay. So I don't need to like re-mention the elements and say, I'm not going to talk about these specific elements. I could just.
Yeah, if you've got a lot to the statutory structure,
yeah,
and you're only going to discuss one tiny piece of it, then you can do something like this.
Okay.
And you're positive this all gets easier.
I'm 100% positive. 100% positive.
Okay.
I've been doing this for a long time. And I've never seen it not get easier. At this point, you guys just need to focus on each assignment. Focus on, you got the charts in, you got the paragraph in. So now the next step you need to focus on is the explanation and application paragraphs, which will be due after Sunday when we talk about those. And so, yeah, just focus on each part. Don't start thinking about the whole thing.
Right.
Because that's when you start to freak yourself out. So just one thing at a time.
I actually have a question on an upcoming assignment.
Uh-huh.
I'm going on a business trip the week of the 22nd. So I was hoping to get something, planned out ahead of time. Like, I don't have to actually do it, just know what I'm going to face when I return I have like 2 days before the next live class. Can you give a heads up on what we have to do for the week of the 22nd?
Yeah, everything's on Canvas.
Okay.
So you mean the week starting Sunday after we meet?
Yes.
Yeah. So if you pull it up on the first page, you'll see what you need to have done by the 29th.
Okay.
Which is the next week.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's all there.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
So probably the biggest issue for you is going to be the perceptive assignment that's due, because that's going to be due. How long are you going to be gone?
I'm coming back Thursday. So a couple days.
So on Thursday, you've got something that's due on perceptive by midnight.
Okay.
Okay. So just be aware of that. Just be aware of that. It's just a few paragraphs. It's not a huge deal.
Okay.
But yeah, be aware of that. And then you'll have something that's due on Sunday, and then something that's due the next Thursday, I think. Thursday, I think.
Okay. I'm going to try to bring my laptop with me.
Okay.
I was just trying to plan out what I have immediately due, just to try to prioritize things.
Probably the biggest thing is going to be this perceptive assignment, which is going to be due, right when, the minute you get back. So probably want to do that, but you can do that in the hotel room.
Yeah.
At night. If you just write one paragraph a night, then you'll be ready to upload on Thursday.
Okay. Thanks. That's helpful.
Yeah. And you'll be fine. And while you're gone, don't worry about calling. If you need to call or email or text or whatever, and I can get on Zoom with you, and yeah.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Wait, and you said that you were going to break, the only element at issue that we do have is whether or not the hot water, the way that it was used.
Not the way that it was used, whether it was used.
Okay. Under the circumstances in which it is used.
So the question is, did she use the water?
But what elements could we, when we create the second chart, where we actually take the facts and we lay them out, what would that be broken up into?
Well, you've got to have a definition of use. There's no definition of use in the statute. So you've got to have a definition of what does it mean to use an instrument, article, or substance.
so we don't break up that do you say it? There aren't multiple, when we do the chart, normally we would break up the factors or the elements into sections, because, you know, it would be, I'm not articulating myself correctly.
On the screen, I've got the armed robbery chart.
Right. Do you see how we separated that one element into both objects of use and method of use?
And capacity to produce harm, yeah.
And capacity to produce harm. How would we do that with this element?
So you look at the cases that talk about whether someone used an instrument, article, or substance and figure out what does it seem to mean to the court to use something.
Okay.
And all that information comes from the cases. But I'll put, like I told Chanel, I'll be posting one maybe later tonight, maybe tomorrow morning. I'll be posting a synthesis chart that you'll use going, I mean, not a synthesis, a case chart that you'll use going forward.
Right, but that's not the synthesis chart which you're showing here, right?
No, this is the case chart. That's the one that
okay.
You'll get that chart and you'll be able to check yours against it.
Okay, I see. Okay.
Yeah, now the chart I give you is not going to be filled in. It's going to have the factors or elements across the top. It's going to have the cases down the side, but then you'll fill in the facts.
Okay, no, I'm good with that. Okay. Alrighty, well, I guess that was everything for me.
Okay. Rebecca, do you have any other questions?
No.
Okay. Okay.
I feel just very
Overwhelmed?
Yes.
So am I, don't worry. Trust me, it's, yeah. I like literally would cry almost every day.
Yeah. Like I said, just focus on one thing at a time. Try not to get bogged down in sort of the enormity of it.
Right.
Just focus on one thing at a time.
And we can't, God, what's the word? Collaborate.
You can talk about anything you want. I mean, the instructions on collaboration are really clear. You can
Well, obviously we can't, right.
Yeah, you can talk about anything you want. You can't review anyone's writing. You can't share your writing.
Okay.
But you can talk about anything you want as long as it's with someone in the class or me or Shannon.
Okay.
Okay, well, if you guys need anything over the course of the week, just let me know. And otherwise, I'll see you next Sunday morning.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Safe travels, Rebecca.
Thanks.
I'll see you before then.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, bye.